So on the data side, how do you think that data is going to change procurement? Obviously, there's a lot of data already, but I'm kind of interested in how you think it's going to change it in terms of how can procurement get more data? How can it get better data? What type of work is that going to mean that people need to do within procurement? And also, what kind of talent does that mean that procurement need to have in that area? And the last kind of bit around it is, what does that mean for the relationship with the wider business? Because one of the things that I think you've talked about is kind of positioning and selling into the rest of the business. Mm-hmm. Surely that's always easier if you've got data to back it up.
So I think it comes back to that whole repositioning and reimagining what procurement is. I think in previous roles we kind of explained to people in terms of the direction we were going, and through either some outsourcing of some activities or then automation of activities. And I think you end up with people who are in two camps on that. You end up with the person who thinks, well, this is terrible because this is my job, and what's my job actually going to be? And you end up with the people who think, well, this is a massive opportunity for me, because actually running RFPs and running some of the simple negotiations and getting involved in some of the more administrative tasks is not what I enjoy in procurement. What I enjoy is, how am I working with supplier partners, how am I working with business partners in order to drive those business outcomes. And so in terms of, really, I guess it brings into the technology conversation, but data becoming a critical part of that. To me, it's all about how we create in that time and headspace in order for us to be able to really drive the business partnerships and drive the supply partnerships, which the more that you can automate, the more that you can then start to create that data ecosystem that actually starts to bring, and it's not, to me, it's not about the data, it's about the insights that we come from that data. I think people, again, can get lost in that, saying, look, we've got all this data. It's like, yeah, but what are we actually doing with it? And that's the critical bit. It's the insights that starts to come from that. And ultimately, I guess, knowledge is power, and therefore being able to really bring those insights and to be able to drop those nuggets in and to be able to have coherent strategies that are based on data are obviously absolutely critical, and will become more and more critical as teams spend less of their time doing the traditional, let's call it category management, sourcing activities, more time on actually how am I building the supplier and business partnerships and bringing those together and managing this ecosystem. Data is going to be critical within that, about how is that being used to drive value for the organization. And it massively helps that repositioning, because you are then bringing huge amounts of credibility, as opposed to you're doing a task, which I guess, to me, running an RFP and running a sourcing event is a task ultimately. You're actually focused on business outcomes that you're trying to drive, and you're able to base that in a structured, coherent manner based on the data insights that's become available, and then you become a real source of knowledge within the organization. And I think that's the critical element, and that's where time, I think, take COVID as that piece, where time, people realized, was probably the most critical asset that we have, and we're all time poor. So actually, how do you create more and more in order to be able to understand the supplier ecosystem, understand what your business partners are looking for, understand the art of the possible of how we simplifying and automating the sort of more mundane, and how we really understanding the complex as well. So how we really starting to, which obviously then data fits very neatly into that complex about, but that's where I said you do have to take that step back as well and look at your whole digital landscape and how does it all fit together, because it only all works if the data is able to flow and you're able to see the total end-to-end picture, as opposed to this point in time and then this data set doesn't match that data set and I'm trying to crunch them together and I've got no way of doing that.